Okay, so let's go. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and welcome to the 32nd MardiGrass and the Hemposium in particular. So, just a couple of small things. Look out for each other and rubbish, and there's a lot of chaos going on out there. The electrician collapsed, hasn't appeared this morning, so there's all sorts of chaos. Anyway, I want to introduce you to Miss Guidance, in case you haven't met her, because honestly, there's a handful at the most of people organising MardiGrass. People think hippies are sitting around under bananas, getting stoned, dreaming away all day. We all fucking work hard. Moving to the country is hard work. My garden is like totally overgrown, thank you, MardiGrass. And, it's the whole effort of, I love the effort of Nimbin to try and do it differently, to try and share rather than compete with each other, to try and work the land in a sustainable, good way, I hate fucking poisons. There's quite a few things I have trouble with, not just the drug laws. Anyway, I want to introduce you to Miss Guidance, because she's one of those few people who's worked for months. She's got a full-time job.
Hang on, Miss Guidance.
There she is, come here, Miss Guidance. She's typical of she has a full-time job, not here, up in Brizzy. So she's up and down, round. Her garden's like this high. We can barely keep up, but she's done this for years now because it was chaos. I remember early MardiGrasses, I'd fucking ask speakers like David, there'd be no chairs ordered, there'd be no one to introduce them, and Kathleen took pity on me, and she took over, and it's been awesome. David's been to pretty much every MardiGrass, I'd say. Sue, probably the same. Awesome people.
One of the original founding
There you
Ganja
go.
Fairies
There you
here.
go.
This is my secret. I only tell people once a year at MardiGrass.
Good on you. So, thanks all. You have a great weekend. And thank David and Sue.
Thank you.
Hope we
and
don't
Michael, woo! Mr. MardiGrass.
So I'm going to introduce Sue. So Sue Higginson is a member of the upper house in New South Wales for the Greens. Prior to that, she was the CEO and Principal Solicitor of the Environmental Defender's Office. Prior to that, she was a solicitor in the Environmental Defender's Office. Prior to that, she was a solicitor in private practice. Prior to that, she was a law student at SCU, just small plug. And prior to that, she was an activist with the North East Forest Alliance, among many other things. And also was one of the original Ganja Fairies and has been part of MardiGrass since its foundation. That's Sue Higginson.
Thank you. I feel really old. All the priors and the priors. And we won't talk about my prior criminal history. I'm going to introduce this guy, but as if he really needs an introduction. This is David Heilpern, my friends. I'm actually only doing this session so I get to hang out with my friend for an hour. You all know David as a prior magistrate of New South Wales. And just for a moment, a snapshot of a bit of what that looks like. He was first posted out to the west in Dubbo, where he revolutionised the way criminal laws were being used so brutally, so revoltingly, so racistly, and so unjustly towards First Nations people. The old trifecta, offensive language, assault police, resist arrest. And that's how we were continuing the incarceration of First Nations people, and police were doing it actively. This guy single-handedly turned that all around, and we got the incredible fuck case out of it. Was fuck an offensive word? Was fuck an offensive word?
Not anymore.
There we go. And of course, many, many years at the bench, did so many incredible things. Forest protesters, activists, all sorts of incredible justice work in that bear pit of the local court. And of course, all the things outside of the court, speaking openly and very strategically around law reform. And then the drug laws and the drug driving laws, and there has been no greater incredible activist who has spoken so accurately and again strategically about the injustice of these laws. But I just also want to let you know, this guy has done so much more. A prison advocate from years ago, a justice warrior is who we have today. But of course, we're going to talk about cannabis laws, and no greater expert on cannabis laws. This is David Heilpern, folks. And by the way, he is why I ended up studying law. I can't believe it. I was locking onto bulldozers and he told me I needed to get a real job.
I took pity on her children,
That's
who was sick of hanging out with mum while she was chained to bulldozers, really. So it was a child protection effort. I'm now the Dean of Law at Southern Cross Uni, and I'm also a practicing solicitor. And I am a passionate advocate for changing the drug laws, but so what I thought we would do today is just a little bit of a recap of maybe where we're at now on drug law reform, with a bit of a snapshot around the country. Things are moving, and maybe a little talk about the world for just 5 minutes, because things are happening all over the place.
But before we go any further, we're going to, together, acknowledge that we are right here on the land of the Widjabul people, pay respects to all elders, past, present and emerging, acknowledge this is unceded land, stolen land, always was, always will be, First Nations land, and we extend all respect to any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander person here in this session.
Absolutely, thank you, Sue. I was one of the founders of the MardiGrass with Bob Hopkins, Michael Balderstone and several others. But the year before that, so that's 33 years ago, I stood in this hall and spoke about drug law reform for the first time. Slippery was there. There was probably some others who were there. That was before you went to jail.
I was outside. I was outside rolling joints.
Yeah. I also was a judge of the first joint rolling competition. That's really the most important role that I ever have undertaken in my life. The winner, sadly, was a 16-year-old. We didn't realise he was 16. But he rolled a joint that was in the shape of a helicopter, and when you sucked on the back rotor, the whole thing spun, and they were joints that were lit. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. So, you know, who says cannabis isn't creative? So, a very brief recap where we're at. You know, things are moving in Queensland, but I think they're going to move backwards. We have pill testing now at festivals in Queensland. The first festival was last month, and that's a fantastic advance. We also have in Fortitude Valley, there's a pill testing centre about to set up. We have pill testing in the ACT at festivals, not a fixed site, if there are ever any festivals anymore. I know that that's not cannabis law reform, but it's really symbolic and important. In New South Wales, I'll leave Sue to talk about the drug laws in New South Wales. I'll just run around the country a little bit. On drug driving, absolutely nowhere fast. When I started being involved in drug driving drive change, I thought this will be a 6 months campaign. Nowhere. There's now 1 million people, not prescriptions, 1 million people who are prescribed cannabis users. We could have 10 million and it would still be ineffective because they can't bloody drive. And this is a real disaster for the drug law reform movement, because no matter how far we go with drugs, if people can't drive with cannabis, then we are stuck in a 1950s mode. And people are running the gauntlet, and it's really frightening for them. In New South Wales, 11,000 people a year will get caught from 225,000 tests. We do more tests in Australia than the whole rest of the world combined, random drug driving tests. We are obsessed with this. It's a sickness, and I can't begin to tell you how angry and frustrated I am. There are police cars, drug driving testing units surrounding this township, and it's purely in an effort to try and kill this festival. They could, of course, be at the homes of those who they suspect are likely to be victims of domestic violence this weekend, but they're not. They'd rather be doing this. It's disgusting. So on drug driving, we're getting nowhere. On possession, we are getting places around the country. Possession, the ACT leading the charge, having now decriminalised possession for any drugs, all drugs. Queensland effectively, now you need effectively four cautions, all totally discretionary with the police, but before you have to go to court. That's not bad. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see nothing in Victoria. As Labor governments are dying or perceived to be dying or struggling, they become immune to any drug law change. And we've seen this in Victoria with a simple safe injecting room rejected by the government despite overwhelming support and overwhelming evidence. So their movement, Victoria's movement on drug driving, seems to be completely stopped. They've got no interest in changing it. I should say, even in the ACT, they've still got the drug driving laws. You know, craziness. So that's where a little snapshot of where we are around Australia. Around the world, America is leading, you know, the leading prohibitionist country. There's 9 states on the ballot for this coming presidential election, so there'll be 9 more, or at least 8 of those 9, they will pass legalisation or decriminalisation or medicalisation of cannabis. So real movement there. Canada, which was probably leading the charge in the Commonwealth, has taken a step back in some areas, certainly with amphetamines. But cannabis law reform is so entrenched there that they won't be able to change. That's where we are.
New South Wales. So
New South Wales.
In New South Wales, I don't know, we heralded some hope last year when we got a Labor government after 12 years of coalition. Remember Gladys, Zero Tolerance Gladys and the works, and we thought, great, we've got this Labor government, we've got the Greens more or less in the balance of power, depending on the circumstances in the New South Wales upper house. And we thought that it was going to be pretty simple because even Chris Minns, the New South Wales Premier, before the election had spoken very openly, very proactively, and on an evidenced base that we should move to end prohibition, we should be looking at legalisation models, we should definitely not be punishing people for medical cannabis through driving, and unbelievable. As soon as they get in, just all that courage, any conviction just sinks. It's like the race to the bottom. And it's really interesting because it is about this, what has happened to Labor. And obviously as a Greens, I'm quite political about this and I'm not going to apologise. I am literally sitting in that parliament. I've been there only for 2 years. I saw the end and the death of the coalition and I saw and felt, it was visceral, the excitement of reform. I just thought it was a given. And honestly, it was fucking shocking at how fast any ambition just turned to the only thing that matters right now is holding on to power. It is the blockage to all the things that we held hope for, particularly in the drug reform space. All of the evidence, all of the arguments and all of the reasons that would motivate you as a reformist to hit the rubber onto the road and just get on with it, the one thing that stops that is we're in power now. And I've seen it. I've watched it. I never understood it until I was so up close to it. Us being in the balance of power, we literally went, this is it. We have this power. We have this privilege. Let's get on with it. So we literally, as a Greens party room, all of us just sat there and went, shit, this is what happens. This is the thing that they talk about when you get power. and you don't actually know what to do with it because your name is I'm the Labor Party or I'm the Liberal Coalition. So where we are, unfortunately, is Min's committed to the drug summit, another one. So we're going to have a drug summit. He's promised that he will do that this year. It'll be a bit of a token thing. We are still really holding out that we can leverage that to give them all the reason to at least move in some reformist direction. We managed to get the possession small changes, but let's face it, they were the small changes that Perrottet had on the table the September before the March election. And that was, you can police discretion diversion, $200, $400 fines, and then if you go and do a bit of I've gone and got some health advice, we can wipe those fines. So for very, very small amounts of cannabis in your possession, there's a more formalised police discretion on the spot fine system. But it's crap. It's crap. It's us literally on our knees once again going, oh, okay, we'll just have to deal with this while you sit with your power and your privilege and you don't exercise your power and privilege through the lens of what is right, what is proven, and what is justice. And that's New South Wales, I'm afraid. And I'm just going to add this, because David will want me to, and I know all you will want to hear it too. The two areas where we're seeing this, in terms of the injustice, is drugs and environment. They are the two areas that Labor literally has just let go of. And they're the two areas we all need to fight harder with.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. And just to be cosmic for 1 minute.
I love this moment. This is my favourite part.
Those two things are intricately connected, the environment and drugs. And I know, a lot of people say to me, well, why are you talking about drug law reform all the time? The planet is burning. And that's true, but these things are related in so many ways. We could talk for hours about it, but they're also related because the altered state of consciousness does something to our awareness of nature. That whether it's psychedelics, whether it's cannabis, it changes our attitude to the environment. And I mean, the two things are connected in so many other ways. Hemp, all sorts of ways. But there is really genuinely a connection. And the drug war is part of the environmental war. If we could all grow our own cannabis instead of buying beer, well, there'd be a lot less beer trucks on the road. It's like, gee. Okay, now, we are here to dispense advice and have general discussion about drugs. And so we're going to open it up. I was asked a question beforehand from someone who couldn't come here, and it's a great place to start. 2 minutes, she said, to answer this question. In 2 sentences, sorry, you said. Why are drugs... how can it be that cannabis is illegal? And it is not a bad place to start. How has it come to be? I'm not going to give a history lesson here. We can all look at that. But this very 2-sentence answer is because Parliament says it is. That's right. It's that simple and that complicated. The simple story is there is an Act of Parliament passed called the Drug Misuse and Trafficking Act. It lists the illegal drugs in a schedule. And that schedule has about 300 items on them, one of which is cannabis and all of its derivatives. So Parliament has determined that cannabis is illegal. Therefore, we are all bound by that law. Now, of course, there is an exception, and that is medicinal cannabis by prescription. That is lawful possession and use of that drug. And there is now, as I said, 1 million people in Australia, probably 400,000 in New South Wales, who are prescription cannabis holders, and the use, therefore, is legal. And it's no longer just tincture but it also includes leaf. And this is a marvellous thing. I sat here on this stage with Dr. David Hilliwell when he displayed the very first vape which he made with a battery, a Bunsen burner, like it was hysterical. But now this is available for everybody using, well, of course not everybody, but using prescription cannabis. So that has been a huge change. And we're seeing the same with psychedelics in time. So, but that's the two-sentence answer, because Parliament says it's so.
It's literally some black words on some white paper. That's why cannabis is unlawful. Next.
Questions? Have we got a roaming mic? We have.
Lots of questions.
Please, wait till you get it.
Christine over here first.
Thank you. I
Legalise cannabis.
I have a parent who is German, and it's always a thrill to get out there on the autobahn where you don't have any speed limits. As of April 1, cannabis is legal in Germany. What are they doing about drivers and testing positive? Are either of you aware of what's going on in Germany?
I am. So Germany,
He's really clever. He knows everything.
Like most countries in the world, I'll probably get this slightly wrong, but Ireland, England, most of the EU, most states in America, Canada and New Zealand have a medicinal exception for cannabis. And if you've got a prescription, then you can drive, provided you're not driving under the influence and you're using in accordance with your prescription. That's the first thing. We don't have that, except in Tasmania. Tasmania has it, and interestingly, and coincidentally, they are the only state in Australia where the road toll is dropping. Now, I'm not claiming that's because of that reason, okay? That would be the same fault that the others are saying about this, but it is interesting, and I'll use it. Now, in Germany also, they don't do random drug detection. If someone has a motor vehicle accident, then they will do a first level detection test, same as ours. You can get one for free on your way home. But they will do that, and if that's positive, they'll take you to the hospital, give a blood test, and determine whether you were driving under the influence according to expertise. So, but absent that, they are treating it like, I guess, every other prescription drug or any other substance, and that is, as long as you are not driving under the influence, that is, your driving is adversely affected, and that can be proven, then they're not worried about it. And why aren't they worried about it? Because it doesn't lead to an increase in road trauma. State after state, territory after territory has shown that the legalisation of cannabis, the medicalisation of cannabis, the decriminalisation of cannabis does not lead to an increase in road trauma. And there's a whole variety of reasons for that. Number one, medicinal users. And I hate the distinction, right, between medicinal and recreational, because it's not real. Yeah. Most people, it's sort of like a bit of both, I hate my husband, but if I smoke dope, will we have sex still? Or I really need to sleep at night. Well, is that medicinal or is that recreational? In any event, just separating them for a moment, knowing that that's a plastic separation, most medicinal cannabis users do not want to be stoned. They actually want to be straight. They just don't want to be in pain or whatever and want to sleep at night. So that's them. Even recreational cannabis users...
And remember, they're the ones that just want to smoke a joint, pull a bong, have a cookie, and hang out with their mates and laugh and smile and talk about how wonderful the world could be. Back to that.
People should not drive when they're stoned and when their driving is adversely affected. Having said that, the evidence is really unclear as to whether there is an increase in road trauma for people who are recreational cannabis users. Just hypothetically, once I was at a party at the Channon and accidentally consumed...
Was I there?
No,
oh.
Accidentally consumed a cookie, and I swear it took me 4.5 hours to drive to Lismore. Now, was I a risk to road users at that time? Well, possibly, just because they were so annoyed at the way I was driving. But in all seriousness, Germans aren't worried about it, and why would they be? Because there just is no evidence that this is problematic.
Hi. I have a question for both of you. My name is Ash. I founded a non-for-profit organisation that focuses on the legalisation of cannabis, but specifically after that, the emancipation of those in jail and expungement of cannabis records from people's criminal records. I wanted to ask you guys if emancipation and expungement, how necessary is that in the narrative around cannabis laws, and how much of an uphill battle is it going to be?
I just want to say you're a legend. Thank you for the work that you do. And, you know, the first thing that comes to my mind with this is seriously the racist element and how overrepresented First Nations people are in the criminal justice system and how harmful the records for use of cannabis are for First Nations people who are literally over-policed every single step of the way. So the reality is, though, is it is a really uphill battle. It is really hard, but it is also absolutely part of the advocacy and the political work that we are doing, and we won't stop, because the reality is, when we do, which we will, get to the point where we get these ridiculous laws, these unjust laws off our books, whilst we know that laws as we make them shouldn't apply retrospectively, we will certainly argue for a justice retrospect. And we must keep arguing for that. And it's really important in all of our advocacy that once we get to that point where we write these laws off our books, we might end up, the lunatics in the parliament, slapping each other's backs going, woohoo, we did it. But the work there, actually the telling and the truth moment there is how ridiculous this construct really was. And that's where the justice work really should begin. And we do need to look back and we do need to expunge those records, because for, in particular, the most vulnerable that are carrying those, they will be a compounding injustice impact on them. So, yeah, it is such an important element, and thank you for keeping it at the top of the list.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There's a couple of things I would add. This is really important stuff. People's criminal records for possession of prohibited drug, 32,000 in New South Wales last year, are unable to get a whole range of jobs, whether it be in childcare, in aged care, in youth work. These are real impediments, and it's wrong. But I think there's one part of me that gives hope, and that is the case of Michael Coates-Trotter. Michael Coates-Trotter is the most senior public servant in New South Wales. He was head of the Premier's Department under the Liberals, and prior to that, and now?
And he's Tanya Plibersik's husband.
And he's now head of another department that I can't remember, Treasury.
He's actually Secretary of Treasury. He's the most important money man in the state.
And when he was in his early 20s, he was convicted for importation of heroin and served jail. Now, the reason I mentioned him is because, ironically, when he was head of the Department of Education, he wasn't able to go to schools because of his prior criminal record. But the good thing about this is, under Liberal and Labor, they have promoted or appointed him to these discretionary positions. And I think he's a shining example of something in the Australian culture, which is we have a convict past. And to me, that gives hope, the way he's been treated by both parties. And I reckon you should enlist him as a patron of your charity, because he can tell this story, and he does tell this story. He's perfectly open about it, and I think it's a really important story to tell. So I agree with Sue. Fantastic work, really important, and it's interesting to see it happening in America, isn't it? With Biden, he's forgiving cannabis convictions as they progressively legalise. So thanks for your work. Yep.
Noted in the paper that we're reading that if you get drug tested, and even if it's negative, that sample still goes back somewhere to be tested again.
Yes, this is correct.
This is insanity.
So what happens is, if you the roadside test is an indicative test, it's not evidence. So what then happens is there's a secondary test that you do either in the bus or back at a station, and wait for it, there's a third test that's done at the lab. Yes. Now, if the first test is negative, then you're on your way. Unless there's a lot of red eye, smoke coming out of the car, and etc., and they've got a reasonable suspicion, different story. But you're on your way back from MardiGrass and you test negative, that's it, you're free to go. If you test positive, they will arrest you and take you to the secondary site. At the secondary site, you give a sample which is divided into two. One goes to the lab, and that second sample is tested then and there. And if that's positive as well, then they will charge you, even pending the outcome from the lab. So yes, 3 levels of testing. And each test takes, of course, positives take a lot longer, but and there's 13,000 positive tests in New South Wales out of the. For example, just the Anzac Day weekend. I remembered the number. I looked up the numbers today. The Anzac Day weekend, there was 327 people in New South Wales charged with drink driving, 612 charged with drug driving.
The article was saying that irrespective of whether it was negative or positive, that still went back for further testing. And if you had a good driving record, if you're a good person, they would probably not further chase you and let you off the hook. But if you don't, I
don't think that's correct.
Yeah,
if the first test's negative, then it gets disposed of.
I think that might be an error of some sort, or perhaps it was communicating a different type of, some other message.
I don't know if you read that, but that was what
I read.
Sure.
See that.
No, good point.
The other point that it brought up for me, it reminded me of the COVID testing. We're in a information technology kind of environment, so any information they have about you, we're storing all of this. They're not asking me for my permission to do this, but they just do it anyway, of course.
Yes, and they would say that, again, this is the black and white on the piece of paper. And if you choose to drive, then you subject yourself to those rules.
Yeah.
And don't refuse a test. The penalties are much greater.
Yeah. Yes, okay.
Okay.
Good. Thank you for that.
We have another question here.
Yes.
Yep.
Hi.
Yep, and then Graham.
Okay.
Hi. Don't call me a dreamer. Why can't we have the plant declassified to actually a herb, right? And then when they have these drug tests, they're not aimed at the cannabis. Get all the other drugs. But seriously, to me, the plant is more than all this politics and the testing. If you believe you're going to get pulled up on the road, you pull it into your energy field. But the plant, for years, everyone knows it's medicine, and intention with any plant, right, can be good or bad. Can't it be like ginger, lemongrass, any of the medicinal plants anyone shoot in? But it's like, seriously, not a drug, declassified and set back as a plant standard, as a herb.
I love this. You know what?
Right? Because then, what? They're going to pull you up. You've got too much turmeric in your system.
Yeah. I love this. It's really funny because last night when I was, got home at midnight, I was somewhere down on the south coast doing a parliamentary inquiry, and I was thinking about today, and I was thinking about the first ever police protests we had here, thinking about all my friends that I've represented in court, and thinking about all the politics and the technical and the this and the that. And just as I was closing my eyes at some hour this morning, I literally went, oh, for fuck's sake, it's a fucking plant. Honestly, I did. Sorry for swearing, folks. But yeah, honestly, I literally, I think it's just the kind of my analytical mind. It's like all of the things and the things and the things and the chaos and the law and the politics and the health and the science and the mass and I'm a gardener, I mean, a lot of us are gardeners, and I've gardened. If I haven't got a garden, then, my brain isn't ticking. And I literally just went, oh my God, it's just a plant. And back where I was when I was 15, the same thought. But yeah, that's what we're here for.
How do you
That's
start?
what we're doing. Well, the problem is it's like where we started. Why is it unlawful? Because the black words on the white paper in the Act of Parliament says that it is. It's a construct. We've made it this way, and without going into the deep history lesson.
It in that you have to ask for
There's all sorts of perverse reasons, and everyone in here knows why it's unlawful.
Oh, well, dream, everybody.
Keep dreaming.
Keep dreaming.
Keep dreaming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And mobilise.
And thanks for reminding us.
Yeah, I love it.
Dream it, believe it, and make it happen.
Exactly.
You're all creators. Don't
Yep.
fall for the rest. It's out.
Yeah, you go.
This gentleman here. Thank you. Nice and loudly.
Nice and loudly. Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is James Rohan Billington, and back in the 70s when I first came to the Aquarius Festival, I used the gym, very friendly. Okay. And later, when I got very sophisticated,
Speak
it
into the
became
microphone.
James. Now,
Speak into the microphone closely. That's it. I know.
Okay, I'm very uncouth. So, after I left the Aquarius Festival, I went to North Queensland to work with a group of people to try to turn North Queensland into a seventh state of Australia. I failed dismally, but I did start a few things, got involved with police, got kids out of jail, started the Far North Queensland market, and then the police got very upset with me for bailing people out of jail. They thought it was a bit of a nuisance. So one of my friends said, it's time for you to go back to Melbourne. So when I went back to Melbourne, started with a group of people, and we set up the Cannabis Research Foundation in 1975. When we put together, we had 4 national symposiums, and put what we're talking about today, everything went in front of Parliament. We even constructed the Cannabis Control Board, because my attitude was, let's put all of the information together, be very succinct, make it simple, and get them to sign. Don't ask them to do it, because they'll never do it. We have to put a bill in front of them they've just got to sign off on.
We've got bills in front of them right now. We've got bills coming out of our ears in the Parliament.
It took 50 years, okay?
You're just ahead of your time. That's what we were doing. Yeah.
Okay. Now,
So the question?
Yeah. No,
look,
it's so...
I'll finish,
I love it.
Let me
I
finish
love
with
it.
this.
Yeah.
For all of you who are students of this, I'm embarking at the moment on a documentary of the 70s.
Yes.
Oh, can I stand up?
Yeah, go for it.
The microphone.
Sorry. Okay. Look, 70s was a fabulous part of history, and it's been neglected in society. So together with my compatriots, what we are doing is a fabulous documentary in the first place, and it's got about 20 of these things I did on television back in the day, because all of my compatriots were lawyers, doctors. They didn't want to lose their jobs. So whenever the nonsense came out about the devil weed from hell, someone had to oppose that. So I put my hand up because I had a government grant. Most of you call it the unemployment benefits. And that was enough for me to get by on, okay? But they would get me to talk because I could hold a sentence together. And when they came out with their nonsense, I could repudiate it. I was very fortunate back in those days, because you probably all know J.J. McRoach. Okay, well, he was my partner in setting up the Marijuana Party. He was also the moderator when Hunter S. Thompson, a friend of us all, came from the States on a talking tour, and we had an after party, and at that party, Hunter said, well, what are you on about? I said, well, I've got to change the damn law, man, it's really bad news. So he said to me, look, in 2 weeks, I'll be in Washington, because NORML, which is the National Organisation for Marijuana Law, has got everyone coming like this to Washington to do something about this. I said, oh, wow, that sounds bloody fantastic. And I'm basically minding my own business in my office the next day, and I've got someone from Telecom, which was before Telstra, fixing the phone. So I'm on the phone, Jack, I've got to get $1,500 together to go to Washington to do this. Betty, Sue, everyone. And then this dude who was fixing my phone is, hey, mate, I love what you're doing. I'll go to the bank and get the $1,500. So Jimmy went to Washington, came back and put all of these submissions to governments. They didn't even read them. And that's when we got pretty, worked up. So all of that information and all the little stories along the way, which are fantastic, I've got to tell you, fun and games, a lot of them were here, will be in this documentary called Marijuana Party Tales. So keep your eyes open for that. Beautiful. Because I can't keep going.
Excellent. Down there.
Question directly
we've
behind.
got a
Yep.
we've got
Great.
a question
Please.
down the back
Yes,
here.
yes.
Yep.
Hello.
Hello.
Doing a good job, folks. Okay.
Right in the microphone.
Hello. Okay, my name's John. I'm a long-term activist. I was an AMP member in 79. I've got a specific question with a very short preamble, okay? At the moment, we've got inquiries sort of sitting there stagnant in Victoria. They've said they'll consider it and do something. Nothing's really happened. There's a new inquiry in New South Wales. That'll be a lot of fun. The one at federal level is about to do its report the 29th. It's stacked with Labor, 3 Labor committee members, so we don't expect to get any real results there. Hopefully we can get them into some sort of working group. My question specifically is at David, what in your view of your opinion and experience, should the pathway we be taking now to actually achieve some level of recreational, end to prohibition, some form of legalisation, some form of relief from the prosecution, in your personal view?
Okay, look, you know,
Thank you.
I'm pessimistic about change being driven by Parliament anywhere. The Greens and legalised cannabis have the balance of power in New South Wales, and that's fantastic, but it's yet to bear fruit.
I'm less pessimistic.
Unless the Labor Party is prepared to do something, because a balance of power means nothing if you're 10 votes out of 100 when you need to have 51. But I really do think, and I know this is perhaps slightly unpopular, and I'll just explain why I think this. I think that the medicalisation model is bearing fruit, even for recreational users. So I sat at the Buttery down the road here, not the Buttery, is that what it's called? The Buttery down the road. And no, just here, just the Bush Factory. Before it was the Bush Factory, in any event. We sat there, and on the stage there was a whole range of medicos. This is in the late 80s, during the start of the AIDS crisis. And we said, if we can crack the door open on medical marijuana, then the door will be open to recreational use. And I think that's what we're seeing. Now, it's not faultless, because people have to go to the doctor, they have to get a prescription, they have to pay money, it's not whole plant, etc., etc., etc. But when you look at the 1 million people now using medicinal cannabis, and you look at what's happening in the ACT with the ability to grow a few plants, if you look at the decriminalisation that's occurring around the place effectively, even though it's police discretion, even though it's not good, I actually think 1 million cannabis users, medicinal cannabis users, and these are on average, the average person, big generalisation, is female, between 40 and 60. That's who the biggest medicinal users are. This is a voting blob that cannot be ignored and is really exciting. So I think that the medicalisation model, for all its faults, and I know them, is opening the door much more quickly than I think Parliament will. And I think it will lead the way, and it will cause Parliament to react rather than them being proactive. Sue, do you disagree?
No, I think that I completely agree with all of that. But the one thing I add, and I can literally see it and feel it each time I am at work, which is every minute of the day, and that is never ever close our minds to the political opportunity. The political opportunity can literally reveal itself at any moment in a political day, and that is fundamental for all of us to always be cognizant, ready, aware, and actually forcing that political opportunity to be available at any given moment in a political day. So at the moment, for example, Greens and legalised cannabis, federal and New South Wales, we are pushing to create that opportunity at any given moment. So we've got David Shuey, who's leading the charge on the legalise it, let's do it federally, let's do it in a harmonised legal way. In New South Wales, we've been pushing for the drug summit to go ahead. There's now another inquiry that we've got. all of these things are actually forcing the political opportunity to arise at any given moment. They're legitimate mechanisms. They're very valid and very respected political mechanisms. But we, as the disruptors in the parliament, we are literally bringing them on every single minute for that opportunity to arise. And that opportunity is where all of us get to actually exercise our politics, which is the politics of disruption, acceleration, and justice. Our politics is not making decisions in the parliament. You know, we are there to literally force these opportunities to arise. Now, the reality is, Labor federally and at New South Wales, and that's what, you know, I'm limited to those kind of two jurisdictions at the moment. We've got Victorian colleagues that are joining us today, but in both of these jurisdictions, we've got Labor, who is quite new to the politics in terms of these terms that they're in. They're unlike Victoria and unlike Queensland. So in these two, they are desperate, absolutely desperate to get their second terms, or, you know, and to do that, we are literally edging on their desperation. That's what we're playing on to create this political opportunity. The medical path is very secure, it's very solid, and it is keeping the door wide open, and it's bringing the movement together and people from various other angles than us who have been pushing it. But that political opportunity, we must never, ever get negative or not believe that's possible. Because when we let go of that, we may freaking miss it, and we cannot afford to miss it because we've been doing this for so long.
So long. You can see why I got her off the bulldozer into the law library.
We've got a question down the back here again.
Just before you do, I just want to acknowledge this guy's T-shirt up the front. He's wearing his koala T-shirt today. Woo! Hey. Thank you.
So,
a stoned koala.
Sorry.
I just want to begin with the power of conceptualisation, and I think we're sort of getting it a bit wrong with saying we want recreational cannabis. Yeah. I think we need to go down the road of preventative medicine. If you ask any psychologist how mental health is going to impact physical health, and I had a conversation yesterday with a woman who was just talking about the well-timed distribution of a joint amongst bikers, or you could extend that to a domestic violence circumstance. Yeah. It all has its benefit. Yeah. But really the question I wanted to go down the road was with for instance, we had the Druid study in Europe that said that basically came up with the conclusion the swabs they're using on our roads in Australia were not fit for application in the field. So for instance, a hypothetical, you've got a false positive with one of the swabs, you go back to the bus, you get a negative reading, so they're going to send you on your way, and you get to keep your licence. But does that test then, you know, go on to FAS and get tested again, where taxpayers are paying again for those? So I just wanted clarity on that.
Short answer is the first test leads to the second test, and the second test leads to the third. If there's a break in that chain, if the first test's negative, no further testing. If the second test is negative, no further testing.
Thank you.
But look, I think people are right to be concerned about giving samples to government agencies in circumstances where we don't really know what happens to the evidence. And, you know, I share that concern. I think it's completely valid in the days of genetic engineering and all the rest of it.
DNA databases.
But as far as what is meant to happen to those samples, is they're meant to be destroyed if they're not positive, if any step in the way is not positive. And I should say the one times where the tests are retained is if it gets positive, and then the lab is negative. That is still retained. Because not in, what's the word I'm looking for, not in physical form, but in digital form.
Can I just say one thing though as well? And I know this is very controversial for our meeting now. Some retention of genetic material and evidence is really important and leads to justice outcomes for women, for dead people, for children, and for people. I'm not suggesting I'm just reminding us that sometimes the retention of genetic material is really important to getting justice outcomes. And I say this because I work across the justice fields, and I just think we need to remember that. I know that we are forging a human rights movement here and an access, but we do have some privilege when we come here, and criminal investigations and the role of genetic materials in that has led, like right now, you know, the murder on the tracks of little Anthony Mark Haynes in Tamworth, you know, decades later, we may get a justice outcome. And his uncle, Don Craigie, First Nations advocate, has been looking, you know, for that kind of genetic material. But I'm not suggesting the differences aren't vast, but we do need to remember that some of these, the provisions of this collection is important for justice outcomes too. So we do sometimes make civil liberties compromises so that as a collective we can sometimes access justice. I just want to say that. But in terms of where you started, with recreation and cannabis use for recreation, my God, that's what we're here for, and that's what this is about. So let's never lose sight of that. Young people right now, I think of myself when I was 16, and the only thing that was keeping me sane at the time was having a joint so I could work out why this world was going so mad and so crazy. And look at what young people are dealing with right now, like the climate crisis. We've got kids who won't have kids because they're so frightened about what's in front of them. And we know that the recreational use of cannabis can help us as a collective to solve and face some of the most existentially threatening things that we have between us. So where you started, I'm with you.
If I could leave anything, is that we need maybe a reframing of it. We don't want recreational, we want preventative medicine, because that's where it's getting whitewashed, and that Labor can become scared to do anything.
I hear you so loud, and it's so useful for me. Thank you.
I believe is important.
Yep. Yes.
Yes, changing words. I was going to say, we've just got time for one more question. And I think it's that gentleman there just behind you. And I was going to say, don't despair if you do have questions. These two beautiful people are hanging around all day. So feel free to go and chat to them personally.
So feel free to ask Sue everything.
He's the one. Hey, and don't forget, all of you, we've got this amazing political panel later. I just want to acknowledge Jezza has entered the room, Jeremy Buckingham here, one of our amazing parliamentary colleagues in the upper house. So don't forget, we've got this incredible, insane political panel at, I think, 5:30 or 6?
No, it's at 6:30 actually, just
6:30.
after the joint rolling.
Oh, there you go. It's going to go off, guys.
Yeah.
So quick question. I'm aware of Senator David Shoebridge's federal bill. I'm not sure if we have a bill in front of New South Wales Parliament at the moment, but which one do you think we have a better chance of getting through? And secondly, what can we do as individuals to support and push those bills through?
Look, I'm not in a position to say which one I think is most likely to go through. They're both... I think David's bill is extraordinarily interesting, that the Commonwealth has power over plants and plant types. And I think this is a novel and interesting mode, because it, for the first time, puts some pressure on federal parliament. And in some ways, them being a little bit more removed from the absurd, shock jock fray of New South Wales politics, it has some hope. Traditionally, Canberra has been braver than Sydney. What do you think, Sue?
I think that's right, but I also think that, and it goes back to what I was saying before, we put bills before the Parliament. Jeremy's got a bill, Kate's had bills, and we've got a number of bills. We often put those in to create the opportunity, the pressure, the environment, and give us that drive that political momentum. In New South Wales, I think that we have got a good chance of getting some of the smaller measures, not around legalisation, but some of the smaller measures around the drug testing and the opportunity. But don't forget, in New South Wales as well, we have got the drug summit coming up, or the drug roundtable, or whatever. You know what I reckon it'll end up being? Jeremy, Kate and Chris Minns sitting in a room together. That's what the Drug Summit will probably actually really be, and let's hope it is. No, it'll be a bit more than that. But I do think that there is a chance in New South Wales that we will get some reform legislatively, more so than Minns's minimalist little thing that he did last year. But in terms of the broader narrative on actually real reform and legalisation, at the moment, yeah, David's bill in the federal parliament is, I mean, it's a stroke of genius, really, the way he's looked at it and the way he's introduced that. Will it get up? It's politics. It's politics. And David's absolutely right insofar as New South Wales politics at the moment, unfortunately, is really, really influenced by 2GB. It's the 2GB effect. That literally, I have sat with a minister and she has said to me, oh shit, but how would I justify that on 2GB? Literally, I promise, I kid you not. In terms of what you can do and what everyone can do to help, it's literally wherever you see a call to action from these MPs, whether it's through social media, whether it's to press, never underestimate the value of making contact when we say as MPs on the front line of the politics, now's the time to write, now's the time to ring, now's the time to put the pressure on.
And I really suggest that people are here from all areas and regions, and I know that. I know we're just wrapping up, but thank you so much for coming and your interest and your commitment to this cause. I know that for a lot of you it's personal, but for many of you it's societal. And, you know, you are the face of this change, and it's fantastic. Go and see your local member. It doesn't matter if they're already on site. It doesn't matter if it's Tamara Smith or Janelle Saffin, who we know are on site. It doesn't matter who it is. Go and see your state and your federal member and say, I want to use this drug. Or I want to be able to drive while I'm on my medicine. Or my kid, you know, I'm scared my kids are going to go to jail. Can you stop these stupid laws? The power of going and seeing your local member in person, physically, ring up, make an appointment, go and talk to them. I think it's the most important thing you can do at this time. And of course, at election time, vote according to your beliefs.
And right now, you've got to think of it, we have actually never been closer to decriminalisation and legalisation. We've actually never, I know it's a long journey and I know that sounds trite, but that's the reality. We're really close. We're going to get there together. So now is the time. It's been a marathon. Let's sprint the last leg together. That's where we are.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, totally inspiring, and you know, I really want to go and bother you now all weekend. But yeah, this weekend we do have a lot of our Greens and legalised cannabis politicians here to speak. In fact, Jeremy Buckingham is coming up next. He's a legalised cannabis MP in New South Wales. Probably you already know there's been an amazing tipping point where legalised cannabis, the political party, suddenly has members in parliament, in state parliaments around Australia. If you'd asked me a few years ago about that, I would have gone, ah. So that's really exciting because along with the Greens and their hard work, yeah, there's some really great cannabis presence in state parliaments. So thank you again, and yeah, definitely come back at 6:30 tonight after the joint rolling, and you'll have a dose not just of David and Sue, but the whole beautiful suite of our Greens and legalised cannabis people. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to all of you.
And stick around now.